Pathological narcissists don't love anybody. They don't connect to anybody. Human connections are unsafe to them. And I think this is like what's really hard to accept, both kind of culturally and in a broader context, but also individually as the children of narcissists, is that we don't really exist to them as human beings. I mean, on a certain level, the parking lot attendant and their children are the same. They just need different things, and they're aware of like this kind of need to fake the connection to the children. I call it Potemkin parenting, like Potemkin villages in authoritarian regimes where, they'll walk reporters through like storefronts where it's just the storefront. There's nothing behind it. The narcissistic parenting is all mask, no connection. They're not able to subjugate their needs for the needs of another human being. And in fact, they don't see other people's needs, which creates this kind of needs blindness in their children a lot of times, especially the scapegoat children. And so we really have to understand that narcissists can't actually be parents in the true sense of parenting, right? They can create a child, they can biologically create children, but the bond that we seem to think as some sort of entitlement between parents and children doesn't exist here, right? And it can be very difficult to see because they can even appear to be overbearing, but what they're parenting is the idea of the child that they want, not the actual child themselves. The child's authentic self never actually exists to the parent. The parent reflects back this kind of series of like demands, basically, of who they want that child to be in this kind of forward-facing snapshot of their family, of what they want to be perceived as a family. And so it's quite literally hell for the children. And it's very confusing because culturally, the children are told, well, your parents love you. The thing you get in your family is love. That even with abusive parents, there's this assumption that there's some form of human bond that exists between parent and child. And when pathological narcissism is present in the parent, it's simply non-existent. That the child is simply a prop or a pawn, right? A prop to kind of feed their delusions of grandeur, or a pawn to kind of get back at their exes. The children literally become the battlefield between the parents, when especially when there's a divorce and the narcissist and the narcissistic, and the victim or the other narcissistic parent, the only connective tissue they have is that child. And so all of this toxic energy flows through the children. The children are looking up at this relationship, getting all sorts of, toxic learned behavioral patterns. And it's just really a nightmare. And so the experience of learning to make sense of all of this can be very difficult and painful. The experience of family estrangement for me has been one of the most painful things in my life. The experience of parental discard. I'm having to understand, like, feeling discarded in my romantic relationships, and the trauma that emerges is actually a product of the unhealed trauma of being discarded by my father that I never really dealt with. This kind of restraining order hearing a couple years ago that I thought I went in there all armored up, and I thought, oh boy, I handled this, I went through this situation and I feel nothing because fuck him. It's impossible. It was one of the most emotionally violent experiences I could imagine. And it's coming up in my inability to process breakups. And so, the amount of shadow work that we have to do when we're raised by these people is never ending. And so, I send out love, compassion, clarity, and validation to anybody, going through this, because it's one of the hardest things a human being can have to move through on a psychological level.